About 6 days before Christmas, most people are thinking about lists, last-minute gifts, have you got enough food for the Christmas meal? However, on this day, 6 days before Christmas, I found myself in Rutland, the smallest county in England, walking down a farm track with a man named Jim Irvine. Now, Jim isn't an archaeologist, he's an engineer. He's a guy who grew up on this farm, throwing bales of hay and driving tractors. But back in 2020, during the height of the COVID lockdown, Jim went for a walk with his family and had to take a detour because of some noisy bees. And in doing so, he accidentally tripped over the Roman Empire. Hello, it's Bob Wells here, and you're listening to the Undercurrent Stories podcast. In today's show, we look at what happens when the land you've known your whole life suddenly decides to tell you a secret. Hello, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bob. Thanks for having me along.
It's great to see you. This is the first time we've met, obviously, and we've had a few conversations before. And your book, Finding Troy, great book, easy to read, tells us all about the discovery. What made you write it?
Well, about 5 years ago, I discovered this mosaic in Rutland, which has been something that's been keeping me entertained with outside activities, outside of work for the last 5 years, and that really sort of inspired me to want to tell my tale, because the discovery itself was really interesting, but all of the things that's happened to me since have also been, quite exciting for someone who's not into this sort of stuff. So I wanted to really get the word out there about this mosaic and the history in Rutland, as well as all the fun antics I've been able to get up to since.
So we're walking down a track. This is a farm track. This is an undisclosed location.
Yeah, so the site is a scheduled monument. So we're not encouraging people to visit, and it's on private land, so it's protected. And in actual fact, if anyone nefarious is spotted down here, you can dial 999 because it's classed as an emergency.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So I better keep a low profile.
Well, we've got some people around here who keep an eye out. So and they will phone me or my dad normally if there's someone suspicious looking. So he might come and see us. I don't know.
Okay. So we're just coming up to what looks like a railway line, and I think this features in the book, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So we're walking, basically the route that we took when the route I describe in the book, which was the sort of start of the adventure back in 2020 during COVID.
So we're in the field where the mosaic was discovered. But before we do that, Jim, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your life growing up, and how you got into all this?
So how I got into this? Well, I've been working on my dad's farm for basically my whole life, and in this field, in fact. So when me and my brother, so I've got a brother who's a couple of years younger than me, when we were kids, we used to be working on the farm, and we'd be doing things like throwing bales on trailers, and we'd drive the tractors and do ploughing and all the usual farm jobs. And so I've always been in the countryside. This is not out of the ordinary for me, and I never really was that jealous of my mates in the towns who could just nip downtown and hang around the shops on a Saturday, because I'd much rather have been outside in the fields, larking about or doing some jobs for my dad. So yeah, it's been. This is close to my heart, and I think it will never change. I'll always be a massive fan of the countryside and an advocate for it as well, because our countryside looks like this because of British farming. So it's a thing which I feel like I've contributed to in some very small way.
Yeah.
So then that's led on to having an awareness of what's around, and looking at things in slightly different ways to how other people might view things. And a level of observance as well. So I think that's really what led to the discovery of this site in the first place. So sort of keeping an eye out at what looks normal and what doesn't look normal, and being able to spot those things.
Tell us about the day that you first thought, hang on, there's something here.
Well, so that exactly where we're standing now is where it all started. So behind us in these bushes over here are some beehives, and I think they're still there actually, but there won't be any active bees because it's a bit cold.
Yeah.
And we entered this area here, and the gate closed behind us, and it was me and my mum and dad and my two children and my wife came into the field, and all of a sudden there was my wife just bailed onto the ground and was like, "There's a bee!" So we had a bit of an argument with a bunch of bees, which was a bit of a nuisance. So and then we ran down the field, down to the bottom of the field, which is about, I guess it's a couple 100 metres, something like that.
And it was that detour, just a few 100 metres, that changed everything. At the bottom of the field, the river had flooded, stripping back the crops and exposing the soil beneath. And there, scattered across the ground, were fragments that didn't quite belong.
So that's to the river, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where the river is, at the bottom of the field.
Yeah.
And that was where we were headed to go and play in the river, because it was a really hot day. If you remember COVID, the summer of COVID and the spring was really...
So this is 2020?
Yeah, and the spring, like from March onwards, all of a sudden we had amazing weather.
Yeah,
and it went all the way through. So it was a warm day, and we came out, I think it was in June time, something like that, to play in the river. So we made it down there. And then as is today, actually, the river is in flood. So you can see the really wet patch at the bottom of the field where the banks have burst and it's flooded the bottom of the field. So all of that corner over there and all of the side of the river. And that basically killed the crop, which was wheat at the time. So we didn't want to come back past the bees. It was a bit too sketchy, to be honest. And we took a slightly different route, which took us along the bare earth at the bottom of the river where it flooded, and up the hedge, which is over to our right, about 200 metres away, and then crossed back over the railway line safely to avoid these bees. But while we were going across the bottom of the field here, there was some evidence on the ground of things that didn't look like the stones that I would normally expect to see in this field. So, and we picked them up basically and took them home and had a look at them. And they're not just one or two bits of it. There was quite a number of these things. So it surprised me, because you think when you're spending so much time in a field doing jobs like throwing bales on trailers and all that sort of stuff, you might notice this sort of stuff. But the reality is you're focused on the job in hand and not looking at the ground for unusual bits of stone or pot. So yeah, it was a bit of a surprise.
So what were they coloured?
Yeah, so there was a mix of things like terracotta, like the kind of thing that plant pots are made of.
Yeah.
There was some broken pot, which was definitely painted on both sides, which was amazing. And there were also actually oyster shells. And really, I didn't know much about history or anything to do with archaeology at the time. And finding oyster shells was a bit of was the thing that made it interesting, because I can imagine bits of broken pot and terracotta being there for rubbish that's been dumped in the field and spread around by the tractor. But oyster shells, the little I knew was that oyster shells were eaten extensively in medieval times because they were cheap and people could eat oysters and they could afford them, whereas now it's the other way around and they're seen as a delicacy. So I thought, who would be eating oysters in this field? And that was really the thing that led me to want to do some research. If it was just the bits of pot, I might not have bothered.
For Jim, the discovery posed a question he couldn't quite leave alone. Over the following weeks and months, he began to investigate, not in a lab or archive, but at his kitchen table in spare moments after work.
So I spent the next couple of months, lunchtimes and evenings and all this sort of stuff when I was at work, researching where these things might have come from. And I looked at photographs and maps and all sorts of stuff. And on one particular photograph, I saw this outline of what looked like a building in this field. So that was a bit of a wow moment and something which I hadn't expected to see.
So these are aerial photographs that were taken at some point?
Yeah, so this is a satellite photograph you can look at on your mobile phone when you look at Google Maps. They're available to everybody, and they update them periodically. So they get taken at different times of the year, and you can see different things in the landscape because of the state of the vegetation growth and crop growth or whatever. And at this particular time, it was taken when it was a dry summer in 2018, and there was lots of field marks or crop marks that were much more visible than usual. And this one stood out like a sore thumb. So it was absolutely amazing. And the really amazing thing about that was that there was no evidence in any other aerial photographs that I could find, from World War II aerial reconnaissance pictures that I managed to find, through to all of the Google satellite pictures and everybody else's satellite pictures. There's nothing. So there's only one taken at exactly the right time which showed this crop mark. So it's in itself a bit of a miracle.
How did you feel at the time? You must have been quite excited.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised because, I thought I knew the ground pretty well around here. So I rang my dad and asked him if he'd heard of anything to do with buildings in this field, and he said not that he's seen. But then he went on to mention that there's some big bits of stone that come up in this field before. And normally when that happens in a field like this, they just get chucked in the hedge bottom.
Yeah.
So that's where they are now. So any of the stone that's from this particular site that we couldn't find is probably in the bottom of one of the hedges around here. So that was a big surprise. And then so I really wanted to go and see what it was because I could see where it was, but I couldn't tell what it was. So the next thing I wanted to do logically was to go and have a look and see. So we planned another visit later in the summer after the wheat in this field had been harvested. And we took the family again, same crowd.
No bees this time?
No bees, but we were extra careful. And we brought the beach shelter because we weren't allowed to go to the beach because COVID constraints. And I pretty much located exactly where I wanted to dig and dug a hole and found a mosaic.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Absolutely amazing. We're going to now walk across the field and actually see that spot where you dug.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look around at the field, you can kind of see, I mean, this is a grass field now, so what we've got here is it's been seeded as grass. It's no longer going to be planted for crops. But if you look around and if we just stay here a second, you can see some slight undulations in the ground in front of us. 20 metres away, there's it sort of dips away.
Yeah.
And to our left, we've sort of got a flat section before it drops away towards the river. And these are actually the positions of quite large or substantial buildings that would have been here.
And was it excavated at this point?
Yes. So we're going to go stand exactly where the mosaic is, which is just here to our right. And this is where I dug the first small trench.
Yeah.
And spotted a few small tiles, or tesserae as they turned out to be. And then some further work. Interesting. Some further work went on the same day to expose more of the mosaic before I phoned it in to observe that we'd found something.
It wasn't just any floor, it was a 35-metre long building with a mosaic depicting the Battle of Troy. The experts later told Jim that the images looked like they were copied from an illuminated codex, the Roman equivalent of owning a Ferrari.
So we're just in the field now. There is definitely a flat spot here, which is where the excavation took place. You can see the rest of the field's quite undulated, isn't it? And on this bit, it's quite flat.
Yeah. So this is at the building that was here was sort of facing north-south, and we're at the north end of the building, and the rest of it went off down towards the river and then stopped before the slope disappears away. And the length of the building was probably about 35 metres, so 100 foot, so quite big, and probably 2 stories with multiple rooms inside it. And now this grass field makes it very difficult, but if we were here with this being bare dirt, you'd be able to not walk 3 paces without tripping over a Roman piece of broken pot.
Wow.
It was so extensive. But so the work went on. On the first day, we uncovered an area about 20 feet by 8 feet.
And this is you yourself, no archaeologists? Nothing had been mentioned to archaeologists at that point?
No, not yet. So this was on a Saturday, I think it was. And we took a very logical approach, and we were extra careful because we could see once we'd started what we had.
Yeah.
And as soon as the going sort of got quite difficult, we stopped digging and called it a day, and that was at the end of Saturday. On Monday, I phoned it in, and literally the next day, on Tuesday, we had some archaeologists from the University of Leicester who'd come to have a look at it. So people always ask me about, do you think you should have stopped earlier? And I've spoken to lots of archaeologists about this, and they basically say that if you had only uncovered a small section, they would have asked you to fill it back in and not bother turning up.
Yeah. And I guess from what you said, you were very careful about the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, and the mosaic itself was really surprisingly, I guess I was surprised. I don't know if this is normal, but it was fairly robust. So all of the little tiles were sort of not moving. They were stuck to the ground still, as they were in Roman times. And anywhere where things looked like they were moving, we just stayed away from, basically. So the easygoing stuff we covered or uncovered, and then the bits where it's starting to fall away at the edges, we just stayed away from it because it wasn't worth it.
So your almost obsession to get to do this, I mean, I guess it was an obsession, must have taken over a lot of your time.
Well, I mean, everybody likes, if you've got a mystery, you want to know, the answer to that sort of thing. So when I'd seen this crop mark in the field, and I hadn't seen it in the 30 years I've been working in this field before, I really had to know what it was. So that's what drove me really to come back and to dig. And my dad, I think, was as interested as I was because he never noticed it either.
I was going to ask, actually, how supportive were your family and friends?
On the day, we had a great day out. And subsequently, Dad's been really supportive, and he's been very helpful with equipment and machines to help the archaeologists out through their digging. And I think it's been a sort of a bit of a ride, really, for him just to go along with. And he's been great, really. He really has.
I noticed in the book that, I mean, you were still heavily involved in the actual archaeology in the dig, weren't you? You didn't just sort of leave it to the archaeologists. You were part of the team. Yeah,
that was. I was fortunate, but I also think they felt compelled to invite me because I found the thing and it was on the land. So it was something which I was very grateful to be involved with, and I feel like I contributed because I was able to dig as well as anybody else, and I learnt loads of techniques and methods myself, which was great for my own personal development. Yeah. But it was a bit of a conflict with work, and you only have so many days a year, so I had, I think on one of the years that we were digging, I took 2 weeks unpaid leave because I wanted to join in. This is not the sort of thing that happens to everybody.
No.
So, and then on another occasion, I was prepared to tell my boss that I'd find another job if he doesn't let me. So luckily he did.
The building was about 100 foot long. The mosaic itself then, I assume, was a floor. So how far did they dig? Did they go to the sort of perimeter of the building?
So after the mosaic was uncovered in the first year, essentially we did some basic excavation to tidy up the mess that I'd made in terms of the hole and straighten up the edges and record everything. So that was in the first year. But in the first year, they also managed to get some funding together to do some geophysical surveys. So they were able to cover the whole of this field and a bit of the field next door. And that really gave them essentially what was like a site map. So for the subsequent years, which was 2 further years digging after that, they were able to identify exactly where they wanted to dig and be very much more targeted rather than trying to just randomly dig in places. Yeah. So on this particular building, and this is one of about 8 different buildings, the mosaic was the focus for the first couple of years, and then some supporting trenches around the outside to try and give it some context. So the mosaic was uncovered, but we pretty much stopped at the edge of that room. And that room was about 11 metres long, north to south, by about 7 metres wide. So it's got a substantial room. And the mosaic probably took up about 3/5 of that, I guess. And then the rest of that floor was filled in with tiles that weren't laid out in a mosaic pattern, basically.
One question I've got, which I think listeners will probably want to know, is you found the floor. What about the walls? Where's all the rubble gone?
Well, so that's a great question. So there are walls that surround that are left in this field. So the depth of the mosaic was about 2 feet under the ground. So under where we're standing now, 60 centimetres down, we've got a mosaic under our feet. And then around the outside of that, some remnants of walls, which are about another 30 centimetres above that. So about 30 centimetres deep from the top of the soil.
And what were the walls made out of?
So they're made out of the same stuff as the village of Ketton and most of the other limestone buildings around here. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. So all sourced locally?
Yeah, I think so. The sort of, if you think about when you cultivate a field or you're ploughing, you're probably going down to about maybe 8 or 10 inches. So that's nearly 30 centimetres. So if there's a stone that protrudes into that, you'll be pulling that off, and then anything below that will remain. So that sort of explains how we've got a 30 centimetres of soil and 30 centimetres of wall and then the mosaic. But in terms of the walls, the widths of the walls probably lead me to think that they were fairly substantial enough for the building to have 2 stories, probably. Not certain, but it's quite likely. But it's very difficult to say whether the building would have been completely stone or whether there might have been like a modern day conservatory with a wall and then some wooden portions to it. But yeah, where did the building material go? Who knows? Good question.
I guess over a period of time, it might well have been taken by local residents, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the river here at the bottom of the field, I've heard it's been navigable with a flat bottom boat in modern memory from here to Stamford. So you can move material on the river.
Right.
So it's very likely it's downstream towards the village. So, you can probably guess where some of that stone went in medieval times.
So in regard to the time of the building and the people who lived here, is there any evidence to sort of suggest what year the building was around and what the family or the type of people were that lived there?
So the sort of timing on the whole site is probably about 2nd century through to the end of the Roman period, which was probably about 408 sort of time period. Yeah. And the occupation is sort of estimated to have been throughout the whole period. The buildings that are all here may not have all been contemporary to each other. If you've got a 200-year or 300-year period in a town, you expect buildings to get knocked down and rebuilt, and the material to be used from one on the next. And that's potentially what this site might have been like. So the geophysics plot map that shows everything, if we reconstructed that today, it probably wouldn't look like it did during some bits of the Roman period, because some buildings wouldn't have been there. And then the next question about who might have lived here, well, and that is a really great question. The mosaic itself tells you something about the occupants, because the imagery on the mosaic reflects a well-known Greek or ancient story that the Romans know and we know today, which is the Battle of Troy of Hector and Achilles fighting. But the implementation of the actual mosaic itself mirrors images that you would see in what's called an illuminated codex, which is a Roman book. In Roman times, they had wax tablets that they wrote on tiles and bits of wood. They also had scrolls, which would be rolled up and you'd need two hands to hold. But later in the Roman period, or during the Roman period, books or codex became popular, and they were a good way of sharing information, because you could easily carry them around, and they were small and compact and can be used to carry information. But the images that are on this mosaic are very much mirroring what you'd see in what's called an illuminated codex, which is sort of top of the range book, if you like, with pictures. Okay. And this was something that was new. So the person who was here had probably seen a codex, and a codex is like, I guess it's been described as being like a Ferrari or a sports car in terms of who can afford these things.
So it's quite high tech at the time.
Yeah, and you would say that only a limited number of people had access to see these things. They're not all, especially ones with pictures in, or particularly ones with pictures in.
Yeah.
So we have to draw conclusions about really what the images show versus where they came from. Did someone see a codex and say, I want that on the floor? Did someone actually have one in their hands? These questions are also sort of up for grabs at the moment. Mm. And it's an area of current investigation by a lady called Jane Maseglia, who's a classicist at the University of Leicester and is studying this in more detail.
Where are we going now then, Jim?
So I thought we'd walk a bit across the site. So if anyone's watched Time Team, whenever you see a Roman villa be excavated and they draw a picture of it, it has a courtyard in the middle and four sides. Now, this is quite similar, but the buildings aren't really joined together, and we've got distinct buildings. So we're walking along more or less the position of where the north building would have been. Yeah. The building we were in with the mosaic would have been the east range. And on the west side over here, we would have had a barn probably. So we still have the same sort of courtyard arrangement around a central courtyard, but the buildings aren't all joined together. So if we look here on the ground, actually,
I can see various stones.
So these orange things are, this is a bit of a Roman pot, and you can see
terracotta.
Yeah, see how it's orange on the outside and it's grey in the middle because it's not been properly fired.
Wow.
That's quite common with a Roman pot around here.
So this is almost certainly a part of a Roman pot?
Oh, yes, 100%. It could also have been a part of Roman building material. They call it ceramic building material. Yeah. And it's just everywhere. Because, if you think about the number of buildings that were here that might have fallen down, they have to go somewhere, and they're spread across this field.
Yeah.
So here we can see, if you look down the hill, so this, on the left-hand side, you can see where the flat section is, in the buildings where we were just standing, where it protrudes and then disappears away.
Very defined.
In the middle, we've got sort of a dip here, which is what we call the courtyard area. Yeah. And on the right-hand side over there, along that hedge bit there would have been another big barn, about the same sort of length, maybe 20 or 30 metres. And then just behind us would have been another building that probably would have accommodated people living in it.
Is it my eyes, or is there a bit of a ridge going around the edge of the field?
Yeah, there is a bit, yeah. So the boundary's been put in. So I think this is a late medieval boundary that goes straight across the railway line and carries on up to the road. Yeah. But there is, you were right, there is some topography changes here, which sort of, you can see where the remnants of the buildings were.
Yeah.
And if you were to go to the bottom of the field and look back up, you can you can see terraces basically of where the buildings would be, and it's very clear.
Yeah. So we're going to go down the field, right down to the river, so we'll get a good view of where it all happened.
Yes. Yeah. So we can see. I mean, the river's flooded at the moment, so it's probably very wet down there. But we can go have a look, and I can show you roughly where the first bits were found. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I think there's an assumption, and some work has been done to try and identify that there was a Roman road running along the top of the ridge of the valley on the other side. So were you to approach this site, you probably would have approached it from across the river and on the top over there. So when we get to the bottom and turn around and look back up, that would be the view we'd expect to see.
Did you say that there's some work being done to find out if it was a Roman, or is it a Roman road?
I think it's been... there's a guy called Pete Liddell has assumed, based on the fact it goes from Great Casterton to Medbourne, that it's likely the route of the Roman road.
Yeah. God, it's quite flooded, isn't it? This good job of getting all the wellies on.
Yeah, for a little river, it does have quite a large catchment area.
Yeah,
and the Welland Valley is in flood at the moment as well. So,
and how long has this farm been in the family?
My dad's only farmed this for about 60 years, so since the 1960s, something like that. Yeah. Before that, I don't know who owned it before that. But so this part at the bottom of the field is mostly made up from alluvium, so silt that's been dropped by the river. So the river's probably moved, because it's on the outside of a bend, moved that way.
Right.
I'm going to stop here because I'm going to get wet feet. Yeah. The river's moved out, so the flat bit at the bottom is very much all silt. So there's no evidence of anything in terms of construction.
But because of the silt, it was where the river was.
Yeah, and the buildings sort of start at least, I guess, maybe 10 metres back from where this flooded bit is now. So they would have been away from the river even in Roman times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this place it's quite rural, and this is why it was a surprise to find anything. The two kites are just flying over us now.
Oh, no, I see. It's quite a special place, isn't it?
Yeah, and and if you think about it from the point of view of where would you like to live, this would probably be, you've got a river, it's sheltered, the ground really drains very well. This is one of the things about this field, even though it chucked it down all day yesterday, the ground is firm again straight
dry,
away.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so we get deer and saw an egret the other day in here, and there's an owl on the tree. It was, it's almost... you couldn't make it up.
Yeah.
So this is...
Must have been a good place to go for a picnic during COVID.
Yes, it was, and that's why we came here. Exactly.
Yeah.
Probably the same reasons that Romans wanted to live here.
So how did you find... did your life change once you did all the media attention, working with the archaeologists? And that's quite a new experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I really love learning new things. So the archaeology side of it was great. And... as a kid, everyone watched Time Team on a Sunday afternoon, so it was it's basically like I was living my childhood again. So I couldn't complain at all about that. I wasn't quite prepared for the media interest. So in the first year, we did some digging; it got covered up. They went away and wrote a report, and then we came back the second year. And then by the time we got to about November of the second year, that's sort of the time. It seems to be the time where good news releases about archaeology go out to the media, and the report was put out with pictures and all this sort of stuff, and the announcement that it was going to be on Digging for Britain was coming out in January. And John Thomas at the University of Leicester, who's one of the archaeologists who run this, rang me and said, the media are probably going to want to speak to you. You might want to be prepared. And I ended up having to phone my boss in the morning and say, look, I've got to take the day off because I've got to go and see ITN News, the BBC. I speak to Jeremy Vine, anyone you can think of in every country spoke to me. It was amazing, and it was a bit unnerving at first, and by the time I'd done a few of these interviews, it was great fun and I was enjoying myself. So it was brilliant. The best thing I think was the BBC interview where I went to meet them in a field, not this particular field because I didn't want them to see where it was at the time. No. And I did a 5-minute interview with this guy who I recognised off the telly. And the only thing they used from the clip was me saying that I'd buy some sandals and a toga and run the coffee shop. So, the ITN news was much better coverage, in my opinion. But it was that sort of stuff, and I learned from that it doesn't matter what you say to the press, you have to be prepared for them to spin it however they want to make.
So did that make you become more guarded?
To a point, but you also sort of then recognise you can play that game as well. So if you want them to say something, you can say, "Don't write this down," and then they'll definitely write it down. So it's things like that. I spoke to who's that guy who does he wears a bright coloured jacket who does about trains in England. I
can't think of his name. I know who you mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I spoke to him on Times Radio.
Yeah.
And that was great. He was probably the most famous person. But then I was here with Alice Roberts in this field, filming, and all that was completely novel and great fun as well.
It sounds like a great experience.
I mean, I don't begrudge any of it. It's fantastic. You have to be careful what you say, as I say, but you have to realise you can't keep everybody happy.
No.
And if you say one wrong thing, somebody gets upset by it, you mustn't let it be too big a burden on you, because you can't please everybody.
No. And you were learning on the job.
Yeah, and you shouldn't try to either.
So how's the whole experience affected your own interest in archaeology? Because you sound pretty well versed in it, discussing some of those things. So
I know a lot about this field, and I know a little bit about archaeology processes like excavation and field work, but not a great deal.
Did you go over to the university?
I did, but I've not been involved with any post-ex work. So after they do the excavation, they have a bucket full of mud with seeds in it. They go and process and find out what they are, and they cut tiles in half and look inside them and all this sort of stuff. And that is fascinating, and it takes so many hours, and it's the hidden bit of archaeology that nobody sees. And at the end of the first year, they punted out a 170-page report from just 2 weeks of digging. And archaeology, because of that and the amount of work that's involved, it can be quite an expensive activity. So if you don't have funding, they can't go digging, basically. And archaeologists certainly won't dig unless they know they're going to be able to do the analysis afterwards. Yeah. Because otherwise you're only doing a fifth of the job, basically. Yeah. But I've loved it. I mean, I've learnt a lot more about Roman history in Britain, and actually this has sort of developed our understanding of Roman Britain a bit more as well. So I feel like there's been a benefit because of that. I personally want to learn more, and it was in the news a couple of years ago that men think about the Roman Empire once a day on average, or something ridiculous like this in Britain. And I personally, I probably make the average up quite a lot. But I really want to understand what it was like to live in Roman Britain, and what the difference between 43 AD and 408 AD, when the administration departed, what that life was like. Because if you think back 400 years from our time today to 1700 or 1600, the change is vast. So what might it have been like through that period? And everyone sort of buckets Roman Britain, just as one thought or one moment in time. But I think the reality is vastly different. And, several hundred years, they will have developed techniques and tools and processes and industry and commerce that will have changed, how people lived.
What do you think the most important aspect of this whole find was?
For me, I've just been enjoying going along for the ride and learning about the archaeology. Just a bit of different entertainment for me based on what I normally do, which is engineering. In terms of the find here, it's really it's still being understood. So the mosaic itself is unique in Britain. There's nothing else like this. So that in itself has been really interesting. But the images on the mosaic are really just being understood at the moment, and they really give a lot more information about how Roman Britain was connected to the rest of the Roman Empire. Even though we are, a couple of thousand miles away from Rome, it's. I think the perception there is that there was, it was so far away, so remote, that how could there have been any connection, and how could the information have travelled? But I think what we're seeing here, because of this mosaic, is showing that that the Roman Empire is much, much more connected than we believe or think it might be. And that really tells you something, because there's sort of an assumption that because it was 1700 years ago, it must have been like mud huts and, people walking everywhere and only going 1 mile away from their house. But I think the reality is vastly different.
Is it possible for us just to have a walk round this field, do you think, Jim, and just see if we can see anything else while we're here?
Yes. I mean, let's have a look. I mean, most of it's grass, but the material in this field is so extensive that even in the small patches without grass, you'll be able to find some Roman artefact. What's interesting about this bit here is, I can see, let's have a go, Bob. What can you spot that looks out of the ordinary in this section?
Right, let me have a look. So I can see lots of thistle, dead thistle. I can see a pebble. What's this down here?
These are flint.
Hang on. That's a piece of flint.
That's probably a piece of
limestone
roof tile.
Oh, it's roof tile.
So that would have been like Collie Western slate.
Yeah.
So that would have been on the roof.
That's about 7 or 8 mil thick, isn't it, that one? But it's fairly consistent. You're going to give me a clue?
Yeah, look, something that's not the same colour as everything else. Unless you're colourblind.
This one?
Yeah, there's one. There's one by your foot as well.
Yeah. Oh, this is a piece of terracotta again, isn't it? This would have been probably a roof tile.
So I was reading actually yesterday that because Roman concrete is a thing that is a mystery to everybody apparently, but I think it's getting a bit more understood now. And they used volcanic ash to make it.
All right.
So that was, and the way they mixed it, as I understand from my reading, was that they used lime and volcanic ash and then an aggregate like sand or something like that, depending upon what you were doing with it.
Yes.
And when you mix the lime with the water, it obviously heats up. Today, when we make cement, it's not a hot process. It doesn't get warmer particularly. It does a little bit, but not a lot. But with lime, it gets really hot and it's a very active process and there's a chemical reaction in there. So my thinking was, it's great having Roman concrete made with volcanic ash, but there's not many volcanoes around here, are there? So what did they do? And it turns out that they used old building material, like this terracotta tile and any of the things, ceramic stuff, pots, and crunched them up into fine powder. And that was the replacement for the volcanic ash.
So that is a form of concrete?
This is made from clay.
Yeah.
But this would be used as waste material.
Yeah.
Could be ground up and turned into Roman concrete with lime and instead of using volcanic ash.
I hadn't heard that, I have to say. Is there something else down here we should be looking at? I'm looking for some oyster shells, actually. So this position here is downhill from the villa building. So if you look up there, you can sort of see, and so the material probably would come down this hill. Yeah.
Here's a great big piece for you to look at. So that would have been like a floor tile, potentially.
Yeah, you can see the... Thank you. Yeah, you can see the different thicknesses there.
Yeah, so that's
different levels.
Sort of fired and not completely fired throughout.
Yeah.
What I'm really hoping to find is a tesserae.
So I'm intrigued by the flint. I mean, there is flint in this vicinity. It's mainly limestone, isn't it, in this area?
Yeah. So it's limestone and ironstone,
right?
Mostly, and then there's some clay as well.
So would the flint have been brought in then? Do you think?
I don't know. It's a great question. Yeah. And it looks like it's not been worked, that flint. So I don't know where it's come from.
No,
it's a very good question. This is a common activity actually. You walk around and find something, and you go, "What is it?" It's a stone. That one's definitely a stone. And that's the thing I've sort of learned now is the difference between a stone and a bit of broken pot.
One question that comes really, and I think probably listeners will be interested in. We're walking around a field now, and we can see lots of stones and debris. But what's to say there isn't anything in other fields?
Well, exactly. And obviously I've scoured everything many times now to try and check to see in the surrounding fields and surrounding areas whether there would have been any spread from this particular site or other sites around here. I mean, and Rutland is, it's a nice county in terms of the topography. It's not too hilly. It's not too flat. It's quite ideal really from the point of view of somewhere to live. It's got good ground for growing things like grains in. And it's very likely that there would certainly be other villas in this area.
Yeah. Well, it's been really interesting to speak to you, Jim. The book itself I really enjoyed. I recommend it to anybody who's interested in Roman history. Nice, reasonable length chapters, easy to read, with a touch of humour on it, and tells a really nice story about the find and about your family and how you got into all this. I'll put the details of the book on the show notes, so if anybody's interested in the book, they can have a look. What would you suggest to any listeners who want to find out a bit more about, not necessarily this find, but Roman history in particular?
There's an awful lot of resources on the internet. I mean, the one thing, if you're in the UK, I would say that you should definitely have a look at your local area, because it's a puzzle you can start to solve yourself, and people will have looked at various things. But in terms of the ability to actually do investigations, archaeologists only have limited time and funds, so they might have looked at one thing that somebody found once, but it's very likely if there was a Roman something or other near you, there'll be other Roman things. So that in itself is worth an investigation, and you can use all the tools that are at your disposal on the internet. Nobody has to go to a library anymore. You don't even have to go to the field. You can look on the Google Maps. So I would say spend some time doing that. If you're into maps, it can be a thrilling activity, really, genuinely. And the things like LiDAR and new technologies that you can look at topography of the ground that you can't tell from a normal photograph. That's really helpful. But my favourite thing ever, and you'll be shocked if you go and look at this, is the historic environment records. And that's the National Archive, basically, of whenever somebody spots something, they report it and it gets recorded properly. And there's an online map you can go and look at and see what's in your back garden. And most of the time there will be something, and you'll be shocked because you didn't know.
And on that note, it's been great talking to you, Jim, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's been great.
Jim's field is now part of an environment scheme. It's mostly grass now. The mosaic has been covered back up to protect it. But if you walk with Jim, he can still point to a patch of bare earth and find a piece of a 2,000-year-old roof tile. It turns out if you want to find history, sometimes you just need a dry summer, a satellite connection, and a very angry swarm of bees. My thanks to Jim Irvine for sharing his remarkable story and for taking us to the very place where this extraordinary discovery began. If you'd like to learn more, Jim's book Finding Troy is linked in the show notes. I'm Bob Wells, thank you for listening. And until next time, keep exploring, because you never quite know what stories lie beneath your feet.